see. What is the essence of Istanbul?
Essence of Istanbul to me is a joy of life.
Joy of life.
When you look out at the sea, of course the sea makes a huge difference in Istanbul, as in any other country. Water, it doesn't have to be sea if you have a big river.
Yes.
Like in Paris, the Seine going through it and all that. When you see water, you then see the sky as well. There are no buildings over the sea.
Of course.
So it is lovely. It is just, you look there and you say, well, life can be very good. You see the birds flying. What more?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Here we are with another episode with Bengi today. Welcome, Bengi.
Thank you.
First, before anything, I guess we can start with an introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
My name is Bengi, and I am volunteering for an organization called Türkiye Hayvanları Koruma Derneği, Animal Protection Society of Turkey, for quite some years now. And I'm retired now, but after I retired from teaching at the university, I started to do a course on veterinary sciences, and I'm now a fully qualified veterinary technician.
Great. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
And the nature of the thing you do, the job you do, the animal protection community, it's very lovely, to be honest. So once we were talking to Bengi, we were sharing emails, and I read your story.
Yes.
And I was very inspired, and I have many questions to ask you about them. So I'm gonna start with your dad. That's,
Yes.
I guess, how everything started.
Absolutely, yes, indeed.
Would you like to tell us more about it?
Well, my father was an agricultural engineer, and in his young days, he was appointed to this model farm as the director of it. The farm is called Atatürk Orman Çiftliği, which still exists today in Ankara. And I wasn't actually born there, but I was about 5 years old when we moved to the farm. And there was also a small zoo attached to the farm. And of course, there were many cats, dogs, and farm animals there. So it was a lovely environment. And getting close to animals like that just started this in me and my sister, this love for animals and to be able to do something for them. In fact, I wanted to be a veterinary surgeon at that time.
Oh, wow.
But for girls, I'm talking about the 50s now, it wasn't the done thing. You know, even in Turkish we call now veteriner, but at that time it was called baytar. Baytar. And it was really supposed to be a profession for males because there were more farm animals and so on. And I realized that it was going to be a difficult study probably. So I did English literature.
I see.
And through many routes we came here. But when on the farm, my father brought a lion cub once.
A lion.
A lion.
When I read that on your mail, I was like, a lion? That's very
Yes,
interesting.
this poor lion, the cub, was rejected by its mother in the zoo. And there was nowhere else they could put this lion.
Wow.
So father brought it and we fed it, my mother mostly, of course, with a milk bottle and so on. And then it stayed with us for about 8 months, I think.
8 months?
Yes, exactly. 8 or 6 probably, but certainly no less than 6. It became quite big. And one day when we were playing around, it put a claw on my sister's back and tore the pajama top she was wearing.
Wow.
She wasn't hurt, but then we realized it's time. The animal didn't mean, of course, to harm her, but she was just playing.
Yeah.
And my sister wasn't her kind, so it could end up not very pleasantly.
I see.
So that was the end of our adventure.
Do you know what happened to that lion?
I think it went back to the zoo because it could survive with the other ones, and it lived there. As far as I can remember, it was all right till the time we left that farm, which was 1960.
1960. So going back to that Atatürk Orman Çiftliği, I'm so curious, what was the concept of that project?
Well, it was a very ambitious and very forward-looking project developed by Atatürk himself. The land there was very barren, arid land, and most of central Anatolia was that. like that. So he wanted to create a farm there, and through irrigation and work and modern techniques to show that a different environment could be created, a proper farm could flourish there. And it was very important that the farmers, local farmers, would learn the modern ways of farming and promote. So that this farm was set up to promote this kind of modern farming practices and technology, and it was very successful. There were huge apple orchards, all sorts of things. It also ended up having a milk factory, which is very famous in Ankara, and its ice cream was particularly good. So it was a lovely place and unbelievably different from the pictures you see of it in 1934 or so.
Wonderful.
Which is just land, bare earth, and then this wonderful community there.
Wonderful. Sometimes when I hear Ataturk's early projects, very inspiring.
Very inspiring in every respect.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I didn't study at Boğaziçi University. I studied at Istanbul University. Istanbul, and I did English language and literature there.
I see.
But after I graduated, I went to London to do postgraduate studies. There I got interested in linguistics, did my PhD on linguistics, and then I came to Boğaziçi to teach there.
To teach.
And I taught there for 10 years.
For 10 years. How was the experience teaching at Boğaziçi University?
Lovely. It reminded me of the farm, actually.
Oh, really?
All that green environment.
The campus is very
of the
beautiful.
campus, yes, absolutely. It was lovely. And old buildings.
Yes.
And we were all sort of same age, young, ambitious academics. We had all been abroad to do our further studies, postgraduate studies, because it wasn't possible at the time to do these things in Turkey. The subjects didn't exist. For instance, linguistics was not a subject studied here.
Yes.
And we were all full of energy and enthusiasm to come back to our country and do things here, to take Turkey a step further, as our fathers had done.
Wonderful.
With the inspiration of Atatürk. So it was a wonderful experience. I've been very privileged.
What year was this?
From 1972 to 1980.
1972.
81.
81. I see. And how was Istanbul at the time? I mean, you were teaching at Boğaziçi. You had this amazing view of Bosphorus, I guess.
Yes.
So how was Istanbul at the time?
Istanbul was very different in a way. Certainly a much greener place it was. I used to live in Caddebostan, and I used to cross the bridge every day to go to Boğaziçi. My father bought a car, particularly for me to do that journey. We didn't have the possibilities of what we have today.
Yes.
And I remember the bridge being built, and that was very exciting. Exactly.
Are we talking about the first bridge?
The first bridge.
How was that? Then how would you cross?
Before that, I used to go to Üsküdar by bus, dolmuş and bus, and then cross over to Beşiktaş and take another bus across to Bebek, and then walk up, which was doable. But of course, it took a long time. In winter, it might be a bit difficult. So the first bridge made life quite interesting. But I remember very vividly coming from Boğaziçi, say late afternoon. There would be a bit of sun shining on the Anatolian side, and in springtime the hills there would be full of daisies, and the Judas trees would be in bloom. It was an unbelievable place. Now it is, and from my room in Boğaziçi, I could see the Anatolian side of the Bosphorus again with this lush greenery. Now when I go to visit my former colleagues there, all I see in front of me on the other side is just buildings, which is sad.
I understand. Yes. And I guess the first early days of the bridge, you had the opportunity to walk over the bridge as well.
I can't remember that, possibly, but I never witnessed anyone doing that, really.
I see.
I imagine probably not so because of safety. People either accidentally or deliberately jumping down.
Yes, of course. Now, from Boğaziçi, you decided to move back to London.
It wasn't so much a whim, but my husband was already living and working in Britain, and I was kind of between the two places. And a job came up, a teaching job, where I had done my PhD at University of London, SOAS. And I was lucky enough, I applied and I was lucky enough to be appointed.
Great things about that university, by the way.
Have you?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Good, yes.
It's a very unique university and research center, I heard.
It is, yes, it is. It's a very pleasant. Like in Boğaziçi, I had a very pleasant time there. Not environmentally, necessarily.
How come?
Well, it was in the middle of London and didn't have a campus like Boğaziçi, of course.
Yes.
But the academic environment was as lively. Different, but lively.
Nice, wonderful.
If only I had a magic time something and switch back to those days, it would be. There are obviously very good things now as well, but they were special times, and people were very tolerant of each other, very warm, very generous. We lost some of that with modern lifestyles, but the essence is there.
The essence is there.
The essence there, and that's the important thing.
I see. What is the essence of Istanbul?
Essence of Istanbul, to me, is a joy of life.
Joy of life.
When you look out at the sea, of course, the sea makes a huge difference in Istanbul, as in any other country. Water, it doesn't have to be sea if you have a big river,
yes.
Like in Paris, the Seine going through it and all that. When you see water, you then see the sky as well. There are no buildings over the sea.
Of course.
So it is lovely. It is just, you look there and you say, well, life can be very good. You see the birds flying. Yeah, what more?
Yes, of course. And then somehow I'm so curious about how from linguistics to animals again.
Yeah, it goes back to what we talked about, my childhood.
Yes.
Having brought up with animals, I retained that element. In London, there's not much opportunity to mix with animals because people keep animals, but they don't roam the streets. In Turkey, because people do not keep animals as pets, mostly, there are lots of animals on the streets.
Yes.
And they are not in good shape, as we all see. So I wanted to be able to help those animals. And my sister was also working for this charity. And we just became dedicated in some ways to make the lives of stray animals better. And so my sister got involved with the management of the dernek, Türkiye Hayvanları Koruma Derneği. We often call it THKD
yes.
for short, or THKD. And she ended up as president of it. And I help out in any way I can. But I wanted to be able to do this help in a manner that would be even more useful, not just feeding or so, but treating. So I did this veterinary course, and I qualified as a veterinary technician.
Nice.
Obviously, I can't do certain things unless a vet supervises me, but I can do simple things like give an injection, medication,
nice.
Simple dressing of wounds and so on. It's good. And I can diagnose the problem, and then I can take the animal to the vet or ask friends to do that.
Wonderful.
So it's good.
Wonderful. And the story of that community, the community of the THKD. There was this American lady, I guess.
Yes.
Long time ago. Moves to Istanbul to help stray animals.
Yes. Again, it ties with Boğaziçi University in a way. Boğaziçi used to be called Robert College at that time.
I see.
I'm talking about the year 1902, so beginning of that century. And this American woman and her husband arrived in Galata port in Istanbul as teachers for Robert College. I think the husband was a physics teacher and she was a music teacher. So they come for that purpose. A few years in Robert College, they will then go back to another country perhaps. But when they arrive at the port, the lady, Alice Manning, gets absolutely shocked by the state of animals at the port on the quayside, how emaciated the dogs are and how many of them are. Similarly, cats. She's just, her heart is broken to pieces. So she decides she can't get her cases open that evening. She thinks perhaps they should go back. She just says, I can't live in such a miserable situation, such misery. But then as the night progresses, she thinks and thinks, and towards dawn she says, well, God has sent me here for a purpose probably. I should stay and I should do something for these animals. So she comes together with some group of people from the Robert College community and other expatriates, and they form what's called Arms of Mercy.
Arms of Mercy.
Arms of Mercy, exactly. I think the year is 1908. And then, so they start doing various things for these stray animals, but the war starts 1914, the First World War.
First World War.
And before that, there are Ottoman wars, Bulgarian wars, and so on, 1911, 1912. So it's a very difficult time. But after the First World War, then Turkey becomes a republic. And THKD, Türkiye Hayvanları Koruma Derneği, is the first animal charity to be constituted formally in 1924. So next year is going to be our 100th anniversary.
Oh, wonderful.
And all because an American woman, Alice Manning, bless her soul, came to Istanbul and decided to stay. She died in Istanbul. She never went back, never, ever. Her husband was ill and they sent the body back to America, I think, but she stayed in Turkey and she died in 1947, I think, and she's now buried in Şişli.
I see. That's one of the things about Istanbul. I feel like Istanbul invites people to protect itself, and people contribute to Istanbul, and they never leave.
Yes,
and they fall in love with Istanbul.
Yes.
And Istanbul provides for them everything they need to serve the aim they're fighting for. Nice, very inspiring, very inspiring. And now you mentioned something about what you guys do for animals in earthquake zones. So I heard a lot of news about earthquake, but not much about what's going on with stray animals within earthquake zones.
Yes, there were of course there were a number of local people who were caring for animals in the area beforehand. Before the earthquake, and some of them were our volunteers to whom we were sending food, for instance, in winter months, which is a particularly difficult time. And there were other organizations, other animal societies, some of them just individual societies, some which had come together and sort of created a larger group of a protection society. So those people managed with the locals to do quite a bit of work. Of course, they couldn't always go in and extract animals from the rubble.
Yes.
But with the help of rescue workers, a number of animals were taken out. For instance, we had a report. We kept on getting reports by telephone or by email. Someone wrote to us that he had to leave his house in Adıyaman in a hurry and had left the parrot in the house. And his children were heartbroken. It had been about 4 days, I think, when we heard this. And he said, what can I do? Can you help? Well, we got in touch with our local people, alerted them, gave them the address and so on. And they, together with the rescue workers, managed to get this cockatiel out of the building.
Wow. and it's alive right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice.
United with its owners.
Family, nice.
And we had another message from the owner. He said, my children are again in tears, crying, but this time it is tears of joy. So in that huge, sea of misery, there was this one thing which brought some joy to some people. So there were things like that. But more importantly, we brought to our shelter, which is in Karacabey, in the province of Bursa, quite a number of animals from the earthquake zone. It was, of course, very difficult to find transport, but we hired lorries, minibuses, which would bring animals to us. So we now have about 35 dogs and probably 20 cats rescued from the earthquake zone, brought to Bursa. Some of them first arrived in Istanbul, and they were checked health-wise. Similarly, those who came to Bursa, they were severely traumatized. If not physically, they were emotionally very bad. They were cowering and frightened. They are now coming out of their shell with the help of our shelter workers.
Wonderful job.
Yeah.
Wonderful job. Very lovely to hear this. Talking about what's negative for animals, I saw one word once we were communicating, pet shops. What do you think of pet shops?
Well, pet shops shouldn't exist as they are, really. And in a way, fortunately, there has been a new regulation that pet shops should not sell live animals like cats and dogs and rabbits, but they can keep fish, aquariums and birds and sell those. And they can sell other paraphernalia regarding animals, of course, and cat and dog food as well. But does it work out? Not always, because the municipalities or the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, which is the body who should control these pet shops, does not do it very closely. Or if they send their people and look at the situation, the pet shop owners remove the live animals temporarily.
That's a trick, yes.
Unfortunately. And then when that is done, they go back there. So we get a lot of reports about that as well. I'm hoping that it will become less and less. Kadıköy has not been bad at all. Kadıköy Belediyesi, municipality of Kadıköy, has been controlling the pet shops quite a bit, but even they cannot, oversee everything. It's the people. When you said the difficulty for animals, the enemy of animals is in fact, in the end, people. If people are determined to do things for gain without having any respect for the animals, you end up with poor things in these situations in pet shops. Also, there's a lot of illegal breeding of animals, what they call merdiven altı üretim in
what is
Turkish.
that?
Merdiven altı üretim means under the stairs.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
So it means
Yes.
something done illegally.
Yes. Underground stuff.
Underground kind of thing, but in Turkish we call merdiven altı. Merdiven altı üretim, which is quite awful because they say there's an animal which is a pedigree cat or dog. They mate this animal with a similar one. Sometimes not even similar one. If it was similar, it would be even better, but at least. So they keep this animal breeding time and time and time again, probably producing 4 litters in 1 year. And this is terrible. It's unnatural. It shouldn't be done. But what is at the end of it? A bit of gain for these people. And also people who buy these animals. There are so many animals in shelters which are dying to be homed. Why not go and get one from there instead of paying money and saying, I don't know, Scottish short hair or something.
The Scottish falan.
Whatever it is, all these, or get a miniature chihuahua. Yes, they are nice, but that's not what having a pet means.
I see.
Yeah, so these are the problems.
I see. Thank you for sharing those problems. I hope people care about it, and I hope people care more.
I hope so.
Yes. So one of the things that I was very inspired when I moved to Turkey is seeing the Turkish culture and it's bound with animals. I mean, we are living in a region of the world that the connection between humans and animals are not very strong, I guess. But in Turkey, it's not like that. In Turkey, there is this strong bound culturally between people and animals. I've heard once that a friend of mine told me that since Turks were nomads in history and they were always living with animals, so that could explain why.
Your friend is right. Of course, these animals lived with, for instance, cats used to be very useful. They caught mice when you have grain and so on. So they are working animals. So are the dogs. They are companion animals, but they are working animals. And I think Turkish people have an innate kind of softness in a way if they are left to their own devices. And they care for live beings like they care for. When you said Istanbul in the old days, one of the things which I remember from those old days was the warmth and feeling of affection people had for each other. So it is that. And European tourists, friends I meet in London and elsewhere, are always very complimentary about Turkey. They say, we go to Turkey and we see these lovely dogs sprawling along the streets and cats being fed here and there. And it is lovely. It is not something we see in our own country. So it is, we should be able to keep that atmosphere. But unfortunately, there are people who do not want these animals to be visible. And the state, as its policy, doesn't want animals on the streets. They always say, well, if you go to Europe, there are no animals there, so we should put these animals in shelters. Shelters are not places for healthy, good animals to live. They should be with people. And I remember when there were big meetings in Turkey, in Istanbul, international meetings, they would immediately clear streets of dogs by poisoning them, unfortunately. Those days perhaps are gone. Now they don't do these practices. But nevertheless, the state should be kinder to animals as well and should not say that, put them in shelters. We don't want them in the streets. If the state doesn't say that, then the people will also follow them. Because Turks are a group of people who listen to authority. They are led by people. So it would be very helpful if we change that mindset. And like in Üsküdar, for instance, the belediye likes dogs there. And they are on one side and people are on the other. And we exist happily.
Nice. Nice. You live in Üsküdar.
I live in Üsküdar, yes. And Kadıköy is also quite good with animals. But on the whole, municipalities, I'm talking about overall Turkey, they are not really very kind to animals. For instance, municipalities are bound or it's their responsibility to neuter stray animals and release them back to where they have been caught from. But they don't do that. Although they have the funds, they all have some veterinarian or two or whatever, and they have staff who can do it. All they need to do is get the animal, neuter it, keep it for a day or two, make sure it's all right, and then release it to where it came from. A neutered animal is always a calmer animal. A neutered animal is not at all aggressive. Doesn't, like cats, an unneutered male cat can produce certain scents and things. If neutered, that doesn't happen. So at the moment, the animals are breeding very fast because we are feeding them. That's another thing. It's very good to feed them, but we should also be neutering them.
I see.
So caring for animals is not just putting a bit of
feeding
food.
them. Yeah, because that's the general concept. I guess people think that they just need to leave some food and that's care for animal.
No, not really at all.
What should they do?
They should either get the municipality or through their own means have these animals neutered. Neutered animals have a little sort of cut in their ears so that no one else will go and neuter them again. Vets usually do that. It's a very good sign. But there are problems. Municipalities, as I said, do not take their responsibilities seriously. Because they don't like animals and they find an easy solution. Take them to a shelter, and from the shelter, move them to a forest or place away from people so that people won't see the animals in the streets. And when they are out of sight, they will be out of mind. But animals like dogs or cats cannot exist in forests. These are companion animals. They want interaction with people and they want food. So they try to come back to cities. That's why you may have heard a lot of volunteers go to the ormans in Beykoz and other places to feed animals at the weekends. You may see loads of cars with food in them. It shouldn't be like that. Municipalities, instead of doing it, neuter them. You throw the animals to a forest area. What happens? They breed there. And then they turn on each other because they are starving.
Of course.
They kill each other and eat each other. This is not a proper modern society should be functioning. So neutering is important. Individuals are finding it increasingly difficult to neuter animals. I know it from ourselves because of the cost of veterinary fees, which are very high. Again, there should be a chamber of veterinarians they have a little bit of something, but they should have a more extensive program of neutering street animals free or just for the cost,
yes.
Whatever is the anesthetic cost and other surgical costs, just that. Whereas now, to neuter an animal is nothing, a male animal is nothing less than 1,000 liras, which is a lot. And for female animals, it doubles at least.
I see.
Dogs and cats.
I see. Thank you for that useful information, by the way. I have this question very specific for you.
Okay.
You're a linguist.
Yes.
Could you manage to discover animal languages?
I wish I could. There's Dr. Doolittle who did that, didn't he? But no, but I have a dog in myself, a rescue dog. And they start learning a vocabulary. My dog has about...
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think his vocabulary is about 20 words in Turkish and as much in English, because I speak to him also in English.
Really?
Sometimes it's easier to say stop, for instance.
I see.
And it understands that.
20 words?
20 words, absolutely. I wish I had a recording of it so I could play.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Things like when you say koş, he starts running.
Wow.
When you say dur, these short things. And when you say something like canım, especially with the tone of affection, he starts wagging his tail.
Nice.
So they learn. And crows are very intelligent animals.
Yes.
Animals are intelligent. We call, in Turkish, there's an expression that says kuş beyinli, bird brain. Their brain is amazingly big and understanding. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Great, wonderful. So what about your connection with animals, and people's connection with animals? I was thinking about owning a pet. Is it limiting freedom? I remember 2 years ago, we had 2 cats at our apartment, and since we were living the first floor, we could open the doors to the balcony, and our balcony was connected to the garden, so these animals could go out, roam around freely, come back anytime, get their food, rest, and go back, play with their friends again. But not everybody can really do that. We need to keep animals at home. Is this limiting their freedom?
Not really. Obviously, what you experienced is the ideal situation. I wish it could be the same for every animal. But even in that, there are dangers because there is traffic. Even in the narrow streets in Istanbul, cars go at crazy speeds.
Yes.
So traffic is always a danger for animals. Then there are people who do not like them. They can, in some extreme cases, we hear of poisonings, for instance, which is awful. And animals are, as I said, creatures, beings which love to interact with humans. They have evolved like that. As you said, centuries ago, we lived with them like that. and they want to be with people, not just for the source of food. Obviously, a person is a source of food for them, but it is the warmth of a connection that they crave for. Similarly, for people, it's very good for people to have a pet because it calms down. It's clinically proven that it can, petting an animal can lower blood pressure, for instance. And companions, say companion for elderly people. By keeping them in our flats, we are not really restricting their freedom. Dogs, of course, have to be taken out anyway with a lead for a walk. And some irresponsible pet owners let them out of the leash when they get to a park. So then the animals perhaps do their poo somewhere or other, and the owner, because he doesn't see it, doesn't clean it. So there are tensions. People say parks are for children. Of course for children, but also for animals. Keep your animal on the lead, walk it, make sure the environment is clean. Same goes for people who feed cats. Make sure it is all clean. Take things away after the cats have eaten. Don't leave your rubbish anywhere. But I don't think animals suffer at all by being pets in the house, not having access to the outside world. I wish it could be so, as I said, I'm repeating myself, but people are also the enemies of these creatures. So you can't just leave them out.
I understand. Yeah, that was very well said. Thank you for that. Moving on, I want to know the first time you felt an amazing amount of love for an animal. Was that the lion?
Lion, certainly, I think so. Yes, but I remember around the same time, but after the lion, we had a white kitten. All white
kitten.
Ankara kedisi. Of course, we were in Ankara.
Ankara kedisi.
Ankara kedisi. And it had been abandoned. Even in those days, people abandoned animals. It had found its way to us somehow. It was a lovely animal. And I remember so well how wonderful it was. And we also had a dog. An ambassador in Ankara had been posted somewhere else, a foreign ambassador, where he couldn't take his animal. So he asked if the farm could do anything in the zoo.
Yeah.
Obviously, a dog couldn't live in the zoo. So my father again brought the dog to us.
So your father was also an animal lover, clearly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He should have been the veterinary surgeon.
Yes.
And the dog was called Yum Yum. And Yum Yum lived with us for about 8 years or so. But it was a lovely animal, so clever. And it used to wait for me to come from school at the corner of the street. And it was such a joy for me to see him. And when I was sad, when my mother scolded me and I was crying, he would come and lick my tears away.
Oh,
so I think that it goes
sweet.
those two times,
That's sweet,
yes.
yeah.
But all animals are like that. Just allow them to love you and love them back.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Oh, probably a cat.
A cat.
A cat. Independent, has its own way, worms its way to people's hearts. Yes, a cat, definitely.
A cat. Nice. And what about Istanbul? If Istanbul was an animal, what animal would that be?
No, I can't really think of what at all. Probably some horrible insect, I would say. I don't know. It will certainly be a herd of insects, probably.
Interesting. One thing about Istanbul is...
But, sorry
Please.
to interrupt you.
No,
but,
please.
But probably Istanbul would be a seagull.
I was just going to ask the same thing. I was just going to say
Yes.
the sound of Istanbul.
Yes,
when I
it
moved to
is.
Istanbul, martı.
Yes, martı.
Seagulls.
Martı. Seagulls, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, so what do you... I was just going to ask you about martı.
Okay.
Good one. So what do you think when you hear martı? Is it the same in London?
Yes, they actually have now migrated to London because there's the river there.
I see.
And there is food. Unfortunately, as in many other places, the fish stocks in the seas and in the rivers are depleted. So martyrs are moving over. I mean, only this morning I saw a marty in front of my building, which was pecking at the plants there. I said, when did you become a vegetarian? I tried to throw something to him, but by the time I went to the kitchen and back, he had flown away.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So basically, they're seagulls from Istanbul, from Turkey, moving to Europe.
No, they are
Because when you said that,
indigenous.
okay, all right.
There are
I felt like
seagulls
Turkish seagulls are going to London.
Well, I'm sure some would be traveling.
Yes.
No, I don't think we have reached that yet. But there are migrating birds, of course, which come from Turkey.
I see.
The path across the Bosphorus is a great migratory route, and the storks come through from the south to north. And unfortunately, because of, again, buildings and the airport, the new airport and so on, we have been disrupting their natural routes of migration, which is also a sad thing. Talking of birds, martı, leylek is an important animal in Turkey. If you say to me what animal you think Turkey would be like, I would immediately think of the stork, because Anatolia was the land of the storks all the time. Now you see in Istanbul, they had their nests above the minarets and sometimes roofs on the chimneys. Now, do you see any of that?
Not really.
No, exactly. So it is sad. Environmental issues are quite awful.
I understand. My last question. You have worked with animals closely. One thing we humans have deep issues understanding is the reason of existence, is the perception of life. How do animals perceive life, and do they know why they exist?
Do we know why we exist?
I don't
I'm
think
not sure.
we do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it is the same with animals. They come to this
Because they
world.
seem very relaxed about everything. We are not. We are always, involved with something.
Yes,
Yeah.
Indeed. We are always in a rush and so on. They have that luxury at least. But theirs is a very difficult life. They are at the mercy of people. That's the one thing we must always remember. These animals, whatever they are, be it an elephant in Africa, a rhino somewhere in Asia, everything, they are at the mercy of people. We shouldn't hunt them. Turkey shouldn't issue hunting permits for tourists to come and shoot our animals, deers and so on, for tuppence halfpenny, or even if it was $1 million. A life is a life, whether it is a human or an animal. We exist in almost the same way. We have the same aspirations. We want to be loved. Animals want to be loved. We want to eat. Animals want to eat. We are fortunate in that we can generate that ourselves, but they are dependent on us for giving it to them.
I see. Thank you for answering my questions. Do you have any last message or advice for Istanbul, for Turkey?
For Turkey, for Istanbul, please be kind. Please care for animals, but not just by feeding them. See if they need any medical care. If you can, alert someone to do that. Take the animal perhaps to a vet. If you can buy a cup of coffee somewhere, you can, perhaps forego 10 cups of coffee and pay something to the veterinarian for that. But even without that kind of thing, just allow them to exist. Don't kick the water containers by the door of an apartment. Don't throw away the little bowls people put for food for them. Just put yourself for once in the place of an animal, and then the world would be a better world, I can assure you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was very much lovely talking to you.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure for me to be with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please contact us on at info@metotalk.cafe. Please feel free to comment, send your messages. We'll be answering you. It was a great morning with Bengi talking about animals. Thanks for listening to us. Bengi, everyone. Have a good day.